Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at the day one of the World Government Summit and the final panel for the AI Forum. Thank you so much for the attendance. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that's quite interesting, which is global AI for good, harnessing technology for inclusive development. And not to put Dr. Samir on the spot, but he's someone from the UN. So we're not gonna ask the difficult questions, but we will cover topics that are needed to talk about. With me here is Samir Chauhan, Director of the United Nations International Computing Center. And we're gonna discuss AI and how it's transforming nations, transforming industries, and not just that, how sometimes it's ethically concerning when it comes to privacy, when it comes to deepfakes, when it comes to even taking over some jobs. Is it making it more efficient? Is it a collaborator, or is it a thief of a job? So we're going to be discussing that. So my first question to you is, I want to know how, obviously the United Nations ICC has played a key role in developing AI-driven solutions for UN agencies. What are some of the most promising AI applications you've seen that are enhancing global humanitarian efforts?
Great, thank you, and thanks for having me, and thanks to the folks who are staying at this late hour. So maybe a bit of a preface to tell you what UNICC is. So we were designed to support the entire UN system with technology. And we've been around for a long time, and with every wave of technology, we've adapted and adopted that technology for use within the UN system. And at this point, we do everything in tech, and AI being obviously the most prominent thing that we're focusing on today. And yes, we see scenarios, use cases across the UN system where AI can be used, but in a very specific set of use cases. So to give you an example, what we're trying to do is harness AI to streamline all the operations of the UN system. So can we use AI to handle the very complex processes that the system has to do, because we're out there supporting the world. So we have processes running, sometimes very complex supply chain logistics, delivering medicine, delivering food, to very tricky parts of the world, where if you can do better planning, better anticipation, you can do your job much more effectively. So those are kind of the functions that we're seeing in terms of how do you streamline, operationalize, and do things more effectively at the back office level.
And it's quite interesting. So from what I'm understanding is you also use AI within the United Nations operations. There is more of a kind of, I don't want to use the word anxiety, but there's a little bit of hesitation when it comes to using AI, especially within governments. We've seen with the US and how data privacy is so important. How is it with the United Nations when it comes to data privacy and using AI within operations?
It's very complex. It's extremely complex because the way I see it, the 193 countries are our owners. The countries created us. So we have to do everything in a way that broadly the 193 countries agree to the approach we're taking. And one of the big challenges we see with tech is a lot of the tech tends to come from one part of the world. Mm-hmm. So automatically there's a level of resistance to using that tech. And now with AI especially, and given how Gen AI was launched, in simple terms, it sucked up data without really a clear ownership of did they own the data or not. So there's even more resistance to say, how can you use this technology when we don't know any data you put into this Gen AI model is safe? And I'm not a lawyer, but I know when our lawyers look at the legal agreements we sign with some of these big tech companies, it's not straightforward. Mm-hmm. It's not English. It's very hard to figure out, is this truly going to keep our data safe? Definitely. So there is an inherent resistance. And the second thing is the UN system overall struggles because, one, the work we do is sometimes unseen, unnoticed, unappreciated, and budgets are tight and getting tighter by the day. So we have to also look at the cost aspect of it. So one, there's a political aspect of, are you using this, the right technology? Second is the cost. And then the third is, have you really scanned the horizon? Are you making sure that you're not using tech that could be equally as good, but maybe coming from a different part of the world? So all those aspects have to be kept in mind.
And touching on, you mentioned about some of the job is unseen. What about the jobs that are seen? How transparent are you with the usage of technology and this generative, strong, developing technology?
Absolutely. So Look, I'm a technologist. I started writing code for a living. That's how I started my career. So I'm a strong believer in the positive nature of technology. And even with AI, I think it is absolutely a force for good. So it's a massive net positive. We just need to make sure we're using it correctly in the UN system. So we're very transparent with where we use it, how we use it, and some of the scenarios and use cases where we're analyzing it. So I'll give you some of the front office examples where we have to be transparent. So these are all the organizations we support. But for example, let's say WHO. They are building health models for countries. So they have to tell the countries, we will take your data, we will handle it securely, we will design a health model that is fit for purpose for your country and give it back to you. So there's an element of trust that has to wrap all of this, but also a level of transparency to say if we're doing this in a very transparent fashion and giving them back a solution that works for their setting for that country and it's fit for purpose.
Definitely. And with it increasingly shaping policy and governance, how can the United Nations ensure that these AI-driven solutions are inclusive and accessible to even developing nations rather than just rather than existing nations that are already developed?
Absolutely, thank you. So, which is why it was fascinating for me to sit here and listen to the earlier panels. And I come from a fairly developed country. I've lived most of my life in a developed country. But we in the UN have to look at how does this affect the entire world. And it's the countries that are left behind. And that's what we have to be concerned about, absolutely, when we deploy these technologies also, is to say, will it truly make it a level playing field? And if not, what can we do to try and level that playing field? That's a real focus we have. So for us, I think what we try and do is make sure that every solution we are designing is going to be useful at the ground level, at the point at which it is deployed. So we are looking for very unique solutions. So, for example, we are partnering with a very small NGO. We announced this at the Paris AI Summit yesterday, to check for bias. Check for bias by the end users who will use the system. Okay. So if you're deploying a particular AI solution in a country, make sure those people can test it. Or if you're deploying a solution to make sure it's, let's say for women, to make sure women can test it and say, do I see bias? Do I see hallucinations here? So they are the ones who have to give the final thumbs up and say, this actually works for me. So how do we deploy those kind of solutions in combination with AI to make sure what we roll out there is truly what the folks wanted? And if we do it the right way, then I think we can try and balance the playing field a little bit more.
This is such an interesting topic that you've mentioned about AI bias and how if it's something about women, then women can be the ones reviewing whether it's bias or not. But what I find interesting is, and I don't know if the audience can agree with me or not about this, is, for example, let's say if you get a woman who's extremely old to review something that's related to feminism in this day and age, she's going to be biased about it. She's not going to agree with today's women's thoughts and stuff. So it's quite interesting because we are subconsciously all biased. So it's such, I want to see a day where maybe the technology itself can predict the bias because it does not have emotions. And with large language models, even predicting bias, what's interesting is because I've visited the headquarters of TikTok, and I have interviewed people from Meta and spoken to so many people that flag bias. It's all a human flagging these things, and all of them, they can be biased themselves.
Absolutely.
And they're the ones feeding the technology with the data about what's a hate comment and what's not a hate comment. So how can we, can we have a technology building another technology or predicting that technology's bias? Tell me what you think.
Great. No, and look, everything is subjective. So you're right. It depends on the person who's looking at it and saying, is this biased or not? What is their definition of bias? And depending on the age, depending on the part of the world you belong to, your value system, different people will interpret it differently. So it's not a perfect science. But what we are trying to do is make it fairer, right? It can never be fair in everybody's eyes. But if you look at a solution that's being deployed for a particular constituency or a particular country or a region, they should be accepting of it because they say, I had a say in what was rolled out. And what I get out of it, the ROI I heard in the last several panel discussions, the return is something that is beneficial to me as an individual or my community or my country. So it's still a very high bar to cross, in my opinion, for lots of the tech we roll out, especially AI today. Is it perfect? No, by no means. But can it make people's lives better? Can it save lives? Can it help us respond better to emergencies? Respond better to all the climate change related emergencies we know are coming our way? Hopefully, yes.
Speaking on climate change, I want to hear a success story. How has AI contributed to making sustainability more successful or climate change be reduced?
Great. It's a big focus area, and it's one of those areas which I was very pleased to see the entire UN system came together and said, if you look at the systemic impact of climate change, it's just going to cause more and more emergencies. Could be floods, could be droughts, could be all sorts of emergencies like that. What we need is better early warning. And our analysis showed that a majority of the world today does not have adequate early warning. So if you could warn people in advance, maybe it doesn't prevent damage to property, but it will save lives. It might save, if you can get in your car and get out, you're safe and your car is safe, right? So it will save lives, it will save damage. So what we're trying to do is think end to end and say, how can we build an early warning detection system for the world? And there AI plays a massive role, because that's what Gen AI is good at, is it takes all the data you have and based on that starts to predict how this will play out. So if the temperature is certain degrees and if the storm coming from the ocean has a certain air strength, it means the chances of creating a hurricane are higher. Or if it's a big storm in the ocean, the chance of a tsunami is higher. So AI can start to predict that much better than humans could in the past, or you had to have specialized expertise which did not exist in certain parts of the world.
Of course.
So that's where we see AI being able to truly help us respond better, save lives, and make the planets slightly safer.
And you reminded me of, I don't know if anybody has seen this picture or video. It was of like the countdown on a screen in Times Square of like the world ending. And that's all I could think about when you were saying about warning the world about any catastrophe. And I want to know about AI, for example. We saw this with the hurricanes, the fires, everything. They warn citizens. Do you not think that AI sometimes also creates chaos? Because when you warn the citizen, there are some that just get chaotic and nervous and they just start running around. Some may prepare and migrate and go to somewhere safer, but it can create chaos as well. So how can the United Nations also tackle the chaos that happens?
Great point. And look, to me, the UN system on its own can't do much. It's a creation of all the nations of the world, and each UN organization has been tasked with a certain mandate. But to achieve that, we can't do it on our own. UNICC is a partnership. We are a partnership. So every UN organization is a partner that runs UNICC. And each UN organization itself is a partnership. So, for example, I was here yesterday, and we spent a lot of time talking about another new technology, the metaverse, and how you can use that to start to design better cities, and use AI to start forecasting and planning how you design cities of the future. So Dubai has contributed, so we're working with Digital Dubai, with Valencia and some other cities to say how do you design for the future. And Valencia just had massive floods last year. So they have real world experience of what would have early warning looked like. How could you have done this better? And they have real experience of how do you warn your citizens without creating panic, back to your question. So I think that knowledge exists in communities, and depending on the context, depending on the evacuation routes you have decided, you need to inform people in a timely way that they evacuate without panic, without actually causing harm, but being safe. So I think that knowledge sharing has to happen across communities, whether it's cities, whether it's countries, whether it's regions, and sometimes the role of the UN is more of a facilitator. So you're trying to bring the right people together and say it's okay to share knowledge. Because this is not proprietary, there's no competitive advantage between Valencia and Dubai. So it's more about how do you share that knowledge and provide it to the greater world outside.
Of course, and you mentioned that, so Samir's actually, this is his first time in Dubai on a business trip. So I said, how is it? And he said, I'm born and raised here, by the way. I needed to mention that because I'm used to speed of Dubai and the UAE. And I said, how is it? And he said, everything is so fast. Like, we want something, it's done. An MOU is signed right away, like anything. And I personally feel like Dubai or the UAE is like, I feel like it's an AI platform by itself. It's like a mirror of an AI platform. And I want, yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed my joke. Yes. And I wanted to know, how can international organizations such as the UN foster cross-border collaboration on AI governance and policy? Because the UAE has been a country that I think we were the first to have the first AI minister.
That's right.
So how can the United Nations have cross-border collaborations on AI governance and policy?
So thank you for mentioning that, because to me the UAE is a great role model. It's a great role model for showing the world that all of these new waves of technology, if the country plans properly, anticipates it, and thinks about the citizens first, you can do amazing amounts of good. My meeting with Digital Dubai yesterday, they mentioned that everything they're designing is with the citizen in mind, to say how can the citizen's experience be improved. And that's a brilliant way to look at it, to say the government is here to serve the people. How can we make the people's lives that much more beneficial? So that framing, and also to look at where the UAE came from, right, a few generations ago to now, it shows the art of the possible. Mm-hmm. To say if the right structures are in place, the willingness is there, you can make immense change happen. So you provide a real template that other countries can follow, in my opinion. And hopefully then others can also move at a faster pace. And I can tell you right now, the UN, we are at the other extreme in terms of all the analysis we have to do and the approvals we have to get. So we aspire to be more like the UAE.
Definitely. And what can we hope to see from your visit here? In terms of, you met the Digital Dubai yesterday, what can we hope, any MOUs signed or any plans ahead that we could look forward to within the United Nations and Dubai?
We're exploring many, many areas. And since we are kind of the tech hub of the UN, it's inspirational to see what the UAE is doing and the Digital Dubai team, for example. So I'm hoping we can sign multiple MOUs. The one we're starting with is around metaverse and AI. But to me, in every area of technology that we work in, I think we can find ways to collaborate, learn. And a big trend that I see across the world, which I think the UAE is also focusing on, is open source. Mm-hmm. To say what has worked in your context, in your country, can some or all of that be made available to the greater world? I see that coming from India, I see that coming from Ukraine, believe it or not, Brazil, Germany, Estonia. So there are different examples from different countries that are saying, I built something for my country, a digital solution, and I want to make it available to the world. So if others want to use it, we can. So I see that also as, I think the UAE has many exemplars of digital solutions that could be used around the world.
Definitely. And I want to know, what are the biggest challenges right now happening that are preventing AI from being fully leveraged for international development? And how can the UNICC work to overcome these challenges?
Great. So the first challenge, I think, is so far, and again, it's moving at lightning speed. So if you had asked me this a month ago, I would say so far the technology is coming from one part of the world. Mm-hmm. But now as we see, and I heard so many panel members representing different parts of the world, innovation is happening across the world. So I think for us in the UN, we need to make sure that we are scanning the horizon and we're equitable in choosing the right solutions from all parts of the world. So it doesn't just represent one point of view, but that's on its own being solved. I don't need to do anything about it. The second is we have to care about the price. Mm-hmm. Because my big concern is when we buy something, a technology, and it scales linearly, the price scales linearly, it does not work. So when you roll it out to a country of 1 million people, it becomes expensive. You roll it out to a country of 10 million, it cannot be 10 times as expensive. That just does not scale when you're trying to look at digitizing governments or helping countries go digital. So we need new models for that. And that's a struggle we have. We are being very creative and innovative in some of the partnerships we have with tech companies. We work with big, small, and medium tech. We're finding new models of pricing that allow us to scale and deploy the technology, and open source becomes a great lever to say, look, we can buy your tech if you come up with a different pricing model, or I have some open source options here as well. Mm-hmm. So pricing is the second one. And third is technology, at the end of the day, is just a tool. It is the willingness of the region, the country, whatever, are they willing to accept it? Do they see this as an enabler, right? Because unfortunately, in certain parts of the world, you have situations where too much transparency is not what the country wants. Mm-hmm. So sometimes technology is too big a flashlight where you can make things open and transparent, and they don't want it. So then you have to incrementally show them the value while still let them adopt it at their pace, is how I say it.
Definitely. My last question is, I want you to tell me, 5 years ago, we weren't even talking about artificial intelligence that much. So I'm so curious, and every single year it's getting more and more and more innovative and generative and bigger. What do you think 5 to 10 years from now? How is the technology landscape going to be? That's my concluding question.
Great.
For you.
So we were chatting before this, and I was mentioning, yes, I've been to Davos a few times, and it's fascinating to see what's on the high street is the trend of today, mm-hmm. right? So everybody the last 2 years has been talking AI. But on the sidelines, the conversation is about the next big thing that's coming. And for the last 2 years, it's been quantum.
Okay.
So broadly speaking, people much smarter than me are saying that's the next big wave that's coming, and it's bigger than AI, and it'll turbocharge AI. So there are many, many things you can glean from it. So that's one, is quantum. Again, smarter minds than mine tell me that the next big technological wave is outer space. Mm-hmm. And Starlink gives an example, but there are many other companies, many countries racing to this to say if we can build that level of connectivity, then you can really harness. And you heard brilliant people today about AI on the edge and AI in robots and so on. But then you really have an AI ecosystem that's spanning the world. So if you can achieve that, and quantum is supposed to be the ticket to get you to AGI. Mm-hmm. So in the next 5 years, if we can do both of these, it completely changes the game. We look back in 5 years and say, you know what, Chat GPT and agentic AI was just like an infant's first steps, right? And now you have somebody who's sprinting down the street. Yeah. That's the level of difference you'll see. So I think those are the two big trends to watch out for. We'll be following the lead of countries like the UAE, the UN. So yeah. We're usually not the first movers.
Yeah. I mean, you concluded your note and you actually increased my heartbeat because that stresses me out, the idea of AGI and quantum. I think we should just draw the line here and not expect more from it. But Mr. Samir, thank you so much for sharing your insights, and thank you to the audience for being here and listening to this panel. Thank you.
Thanks so much.